warm welcome to English News Bulletin on Med News. Here with you with top stories from Turkey and Kurdistan. After more than 4 years in prison, 48 Kurdish politicians and human rights activists finally have been released from jail on Saturday night. In 2009, some 92 politicians and human rights activists had been arrested within the scope of the so-called KGK Kurdish Communities Union trial.
48 Kurdish politicians taken prisoner in 2009 because of framed-up KCK case, known as political genocide case, has been released yesterday evening and held a press conference today in front of the building of BDP's Diyarbakir branch. They were accompanied by BDP politicians and Mayor of Diyarbakir, Gültan Kışanak. Speaking on behalf of 48 politicians, Gülcihan Şimşek said the Turkish government attempted at liquidation of the Kurdish political movement through the framed-up KCK case, but the organized resistance of people nullified the attempts of the Turkish state, and that this was proven by the results of the last local elections in Kurdistan. The released politicians remarked that their release is neither the result of government's mercy or its proposal of a solution, nor is meant to be liberation of all captives. The politicians also pointed out that framed-up KCK case has primarily targeted Kurdish women and added, "You can become anything in Turkey as far as you surrender your identity, your culture and your values. But if you insist on your identity of being a woman and a Kurdish, you only become the suspect, the accused and the convict." This coup towards Kurdish politicians as well relied on this fact and primarily targeted Kurdish women who opposed to thousands years old enslavement of women and struggled for their liberty and for equality. This operation of the state has turned locking of women in the houses into locking in the prisons. Our most natural means for democratic struggle has been put as means of crime. The struggle of women wanted to be deterred by this operation. However, women continue to enlarge democratic free women's movement, not only massively, but qualitatively as well. The most bewildering example to this is the co-presidency system of BDP in the last local elections. The politicians also called attention to hundreds of critically ill convicts in the prisons and noted that they received no treatment and were abandoned to death by neglect. They ended their press release stressing that there can happen to be no peace and democratization without the liberation of primarily the Kurdish leader Öcalan, the critically ill captives, and the political captives kept in the prisons for over 20 years.
Turkey's Constitutional Court overturns controversial judicial bill on April 11th. The bill on the Supreme Board of Judges and Prosecutors, HSYK, drafted by the government as a response to graft allegations and which is violating the independency of the Supreme Board, has been partly overturned by the Constitutional Court on 11th of April. The court has overturned the articles in the law regarding new competences conferred to the Justice Minister. The court also overturned a related law that gives authority for the treatment and protection of private information to the Communication Technologies Institution. Turkish army continues to intensify its military activity and to concentrate its military forces in North Kurdistan. The Turkish army has been engaged in concentrating its military force last week in Hakkari district, Shemdinli, a town at the Iraqi border. It has been known almost a year that Kurdish Communities Union had decided to withdraw its guerrilla forces out of Turkey. However, so far the Turkish government has not taken any steps to continue the peace process. On the contrary, AKP's aggressive policy is leading to the ending of the peace negotiations. This gets proved by the recent intensification of military actions in North Kurdistan. AKP deploys its special forces along the border and builds new outposts and turns the old outposts into troops to increase the number of soldiers. Moreover, the barrels of tanks, Panzers, Cobras and BTRs were directed to federal Kurdistan region. It seems that the Turkish army is getting prepared for a war. A world famous South African Archbishop and Nobel Peace Prize Desmond Tutu called on Turkish government to release Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan. In a written statement, Tutu said Öcalan's imprisonment has so far served no one's interest and any purpose, reminding that Öcalan continued to express his belief for the possibility of a permanent peace despite his isolation for the last 15 years. Tutu said Öcalan convinced Kurdish libertarian fighters for ceasefire and prepared a concrete program for the realization of peace. Tutu also said Öcalan has been eventually more appreciated by Kurdish and Turkish people for what he has been doing under imprisonment. Tutu also pointed out that delay of Öcalan's release counted to delay of freedom and true peace. Desmond Tutu was a close friend of Nelson Mandela, the legendary leader of South Africa who passed away recently. Tutu is well known as a human rights activist on the international level.
And so, I want...
Ahmet Metropolitan Municipal Court Mayor Gülten Kışanak told Al Jazeera's Turkish service that it was time to carry out work on Democratic Autonomy project, stressing that she wanted local governments to have a share of all local sources of energy and natural sources.
Kışanak called the Municipal Assembly's Thursday meeting a parliamentary meeting, saying it was the first step in building the Democratic Autonomy project. In the coming days, it will become clearer how this will take shape, how the commissions will be set up, and how they will work. As a response to a question regarding the KCK's suggestion that a canton system could be set up, Kışanak said, "As the BDP, we have had a democratic autonomy project based on regional governments since 2007. This is in fact close to the canton project that exists in Rojava. If there is a need for a new name, the relevant organs of the party will decide on it. Our political perspective is the democratic autonomy project accepted by the party conference in 2007. Kışanak described their initial expectations from the Ankara government thus: "We would like support from central government for our municipalities' work, particularly regarding mother tongue education and public services. If they adopt a positive attitude, we shall do all we can to resolve this at the local level. It is of the greatest importance to implement mother tongue education and ensure the use of the mother tongue in the public sphere. This will make a significant contribution to the resolution of the Kurdish question. As long as they are not obstructive, we will implement this." Kışanak also pointed out that the local resources were used in energy production. However, the energy was taken to the west for investments, and added, "Dams in the region are not used for irrigation, but only for electricity to be transferred to the west of the country. We are left with the debt of electricity. The oil production contaminates the drinking water. The dams are causing big environmental damages. It is not acceptable that the local resources are used to supply energy for the west, and we are only left with the contamination, pollution, and environmental destruction. We say that the local administrations must have share in the local use of resources."
Görmesi lazım ve biz ancak böyle geleceğe daha...
Kurdistan Federal Region Administration continues digging trenches on the border with Rojava despite the protests of pupils and KCK's call for a dialogue.
Since the beginning of April, Kurdistan Federal Region Administration has been digging trenches on the border with South Rojava. There has been no official announcement regarding the reason of entrenchment. On 9th of April, hundreds of young people organized a protest at the border. The Peshmergas opened fire on them, leaving 18-year-old wounded. On 10th of April, thousands protested the trenches at the same place, demanding the removal of borders dividing Kurdistan. Kurdish Communities Union, KCK's co-presidency, released a written statement on 11th of April demanding the ending of digging trenches in a period when national unity gained utmost importance. KCK said they expected the entire Kurdish people, political groups and political parties, including KDP and KGR, to claim and side with Rojava revolution and not only to support it, but also defend it. Having noted that the trenches were dug with the knowledge of KDP and caused to tensions and that the tension between Kurdish people will only make the enemies happy, KCK said the problems between the Kurds must have been solved through dialogue and political means without giving way to any tensions and divisions. However, notwithstanding KCK's call for dialogue, Erbil administration continued and in fact intensified the work of digging trenches despite the weekend holiday. On the other hand, Turkish government, not contenting with the walls and mesh wires it placed on the border, started simultaneously with KDP digging trenches in the north from Serekaniye to Derek and concentrates its military force on the border and fastens building of new outposts.
Congregal co-presidency released a written statement condemning the attack at Kobani region.
The Congregal co-presidency released a written statement drawing attention to continuing attacks on the Kobani canton of West Kurdistan, saying the Turkish state and the ISIS gangs it supports are attempting to overthrow the Kobani canton by encircling it. This is the first part of a plan to bring about the collapse of the Rojava revolution. Congregal continued, therefore, all our people should mobilize in support of the Kobani canton. The people of South Kurdistan should also raise their voices against the KDP's attitude to the Rojava revolution and say enough. Congregal called on people of North Kurdistan to stand up and oppose the policy of encirclement of the Kobani canton and continued, the people of the region, first and foremost the people of Urfa, Mardin and Antep, should see themselves as responsible for taking possession of Kobani. Our people living in Europe also have a significant responsibility as the voice of Kobani in the outside world.
200,000 Armenians from Kasab and surrounding villages were forced to flee by the attacks launched by Al-Qaeda-linked groups. There is still no information about the Alavith people who were living in the Kasab. It is suspected that they have all been killed by the gangs. 9 Armenians are also missing.
On 21st of March, Al-Qaeda-linked groups launched attacks on the Armenian-populated town of Kasab in Syria, near the Turkish border. The civilian population of the area was forced to flee to neighboring hills, with many seeking safe haven in the nearby cities of Latakia and Basit. It was reported that the attackers advanced directly from Turkish territory, were being supported by the Turkish military. Some Kasab village guards reported that the Turkish military withdrew from its positions along the border shortly before the fighters crossed from Turkey. In order to repel the claims, Turkish foreign minister said Turkey's doors were wide open to Armenians. And a total of 18 Syrian Armenians were brought to the Yayladağ border gate in the southern province of Hatay. According to the reports of the surviving Armenians, the Alevis might very likely have been killed. It is also reported that 9 Armenians are missing and their names are communicated to Turkish Foreign Ministry. The missing Armenians are suspected to be held hostage by the attacker groups.
Havun gelir, gazife gelir, bilmem. Her gün o korku içinde.
Co-chair of PYD, Saleh Muslim, shared his comments on Syrian war and Kurdish administration in Rojava in an article published by several international newspapers, demanding support of Western governments to democratic regime in Rojava.
The civil war now engulfing Syria emerged from its people's desire for political change. But the war is not universal. Since the outbreak of protests in 2011 against President Bashar Assad's regime and long before, one group of Syrians, the Kurdish community, has consistently sought peaceful change and respect for the rights of all. For the Kurds, the widening conflict meant that, in addition to fighting a brutal dictatorship, we were now confronted by Al-Qaeda militants seeking to establish an Islamic emirate in the Middle East. The Kurds have never sought to achieve democratic goals through violence. We wanted no part of a revolution that massacred children, drove families from their homes and left millions destitute. We took up arms only to protect ourselves and our property from an immediate extreme Islamist threat that tolerated no dissent. Radical Islamists targeted us because our people generally hold secular views of politics and society, with women, for example, playing a prominent role in public and professional life. Islamists also abhor us because we demand self-determination, whereas they seek an amorphous emirate that lumps all Muslims together without regard for cultural and historical differences. We also know that violence will not solve this conflict. Syrian Kurds political representatives advocate a negotiated settlement and are willing to sit down with anyone, regime or rebels, to achieve a peace agreement. Other rebel fractions demand Assad's resignation. We insist on no such preconditions. Our chief goal is to end the persecution and discrimination, including the ban on the Kurdish language and our exclusion from certain professions, and we believe that this can best be achieved through a decentralized political system that devolves power to the provinces. We consistently demonstrate a commitment to democracy, but the international community has been deaf to our appeals. The United States, Europe, and other Western governments refuse to negotiate with us, even though neighboring Iraq and Turkey have done so willingly. The region's new geopolitical realities demand new political arrangements. Syria's Kurds are ready to build a more democratic country. We need Western support and expertise to consolidate the free society to which everyone aspires. By ignoring us, Western governments are disregarding the secular, democratic values that they claim to uphold. Worse, our fragile democracy risks falling victim to extremists who pose a mortal danger not just to Syria, but to the wider Middle East and the world.
Freelance journalist Roj Ahmed, who is covering mainly the Kurdish region in the Middle East, went to Rojava, West Kurdistan recently. Roj spoke to our camera about his observations from Rojava and how the self-governing system put into practice by the people in the region.
Rojava, or Western Kurdistan, or Kurdistan region in Syria, it is very, very different from, basically it's very different from what you would see and read in the media. And on the ground there, you would see a completely different region that's trying to live and sustain its principles and its way of life amid Syria's civil war. So what I saw, it was an entirely different place from what we see on television and what we hear and read in the radio and in the newspapers. So the cantons, I think, on an international perspective, it was a reply to Geneva to saying, look, you know, we are here, we exist, whether you like it or not, and this is our principle. This is the way we would like to run things in Syria, which is what they call democratic self-rule of communities. On the ground in Syria, the cantons, the Kurds generally, the population think it was needed to be each region think it was, you know, it's absolutely necessary to announce a government, because in the last 2 years they've established their own what they call a People's Council. From every street you have a People's Council, from every neighborhood you have a People's Council, and then every town, village, city you have a People's Council. It's a bit similar to what in the West we would call communes. In these communes, they needed a bigger establishment to get all of them together, because otherwise things, you know, would go not as organized perhaps. And people really wanted representation, so they think it was very necessary to announce the governments and show the world that in a form of a government, the peaceful coexistence that they've established there between Syriac people, Arabs, Kurds, and various other ethnic minorities and religious groups coming together in these communities. It's possible, and it's important that the world sees these communities can come together and form government, and they just actually did that. Now, I was in the Jizre canton, for example, and there you have Syriac Christians who are ministers and women, which is very different from what's happening in the rest of Syria, where there's a sectarian civil war basically devastating the whole country. And you also have Syriac Christian militias as part of the Jizre canton government, as well as the pro-Kurdish YPG forces and the women protection unions and so on and so forth. And you have, everybody is represented in the communes, in the local communes, women protection units to protect themselves from their enemies, and also from internal mentality that still adheres to the idea of oppression of women and seeing women as second-class citizens. So women plays a leading role. And also on the political side, like I said, you have ministers in the government, but also the TEVDEM, which is it's not a political movement at all. It's a social movement. It's basically because the Kurds they believe that they're leading a political social revolution. So a political revolution fighting for Kurdish national rights. However, this revolution is equally a social revolution, making fundamental changes on everyday level in the Kurdish society, and trying to take forward the Kurdish society one step further into, I wouldn't say modernization, but into an open-minded society that firmly accepts gender equality. Digging trenches by political establishments has a history, basically. It's not something new. I think the KDP, it's digging the trenches because it's the KDP, the Kurdistan Democratic Party in Iraq. I think it's scared from what's happening in Rojava, not because of what they call security reasons. No, this is not true at all, because there are no jihadist rebels in these areas actually. However, they are scared of the alternatives to the 20-year rule in Iraqi Kurdistan, because until Rojava kicked off, there was only one form of government for the Kurds in the Middle East, and that was the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where in the last 20 years, although it has failed on democratic issues, it has failed on gender equality, it has failed on many issues, journalists getting killed, imprisonment of activists, and so on and so forth. But the Kurds still adhere to the idea that, okay, this is better still than an occupying force. Now, when Rojava kicked off in 2012 and onward, an alternative to this system of ruling emerged for the Kurds, a new way of being ruled or ruling ourselves, as they say in the Middle East, came to a fore. Now, it is very different. It's two very different systems, Rojava and Iraqi Kurdistan. It's a self-sustained, self-ruled region. In Rojava, people adhere to the idea that we need to be ruled by ourselves. Like I said earlier, women play a very crucial role. In Iraqi Kurdistan, it's very, very different. You don't see that at all. It's a de facto region where, since the occupation of Iraq, it has everything that happens there has been exported politically, economically, socially even. So they are scared from this new system, from this new alternative emerging next to them in Rojava. As well as that, and saying that,
hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees living in urban areas are struggling to survive. They face rising rents, inadequate accommodation and educational challenges for their children. Name.
Syria lies just beyond these mountains. The war there has forced millions to flee. Many have come to Ramtha on the northern Jordanian border. Majda and her children live in this converted storehouse for more than $280 a month. She works as a housekeeper or harvesting olives to make ends meet. But steady work is rare, so she uses food aid to cover the rent.
ندبر يعني بيطلع لنا هالكيبونات، قسم نعطيه بنجيب اغراض لصاحب البيت من قسم الاجار وقسم بنجيب اكل بيه لاولادنا.
Ramtha is now home to roughly 80,000 Syrian refugees. 2 camps in the area host less than 1,200, which means the vast majority of refugees live in the city, alongside the local population. Rents have quadrupled since the war in Syria started. This complex houses refugees. The property owner says he donates rooms to the most destitute among them.
مجموع العائلات الموجودين في السكن 62 عائلة، منهم 22 عائلة محتاجين وفقراء لا يمتلكون المال، تم إيواءهم مجانا في السكن، وباقي العائلات بدفعوا أجور رمزية بسيطة جدا.
Ubada is living here for free. He came to the complex with 13 members of his family in January of last year. Both of his parents are blind and have been since childhood. They aren't able to support themselves. Here, they don't pay rent, water, or power bills. Such a contribution is vital.
يعني متى ما كان في أي شيء اللي يحيجنا إنه نطلع من هذا البيت راح نصفى بالشارع. في بيت نستأجر أجار ما في مصاري. يعني إنه نشتغل ما بنقدر.
450,000 Syrian refugees live in Jordan's urban communities. To date, UNHCR has helped 120,000 vulnerable people with financial assistance. Surviving is a struggle everywhere. But in Ramtha, family ties and a trade tradition dating back centuries have allowed the city to nearly double its population in 3 years. Another example of Jordan extending a helping hand for its Syrian neighbors in need.
The International Symposium on Mother Tongue Education began in Diyarbakir yesterday. From 4 parts of Kurdistan, Turkey, and from many other countries, many people contributed to the symposium.
The symposium has been supported by the European Union and it has been organized by Kurder and Political Social Research Center, SAMER, at Cegerhwin Cultural Center. BDP Diyarbakir Metropolitan Municipality Co-Mayor Gülten Kışanak made the opening speech. Kışanak noted, Kurdish people have a long history of struggle on the subject of right to speak their mother tongue. The struggle, she said, has continued for 90 years to break away from the effects of assimilation. Boğaziçi University teaching member Fatma Gök saluted the participants in Kurdish and made her speech, Mother Tongue in the Improvement of Identity, Importance of Education in Mother Tongue and Multilingualism. Gök said the question about whether Kurdish education should be given was no longer valid as, she said, the Kurdish freedom struggle made sure this was not an issue anymore. Not building the legal ground yet is wrong, she added. There's still a mentality of colonialism in the national education, and define the education generally with the notion of right, underlined Gök. SAMER Education Studies Coordinator Soner Şimşek said that language should be a tool towards democratization. The one-language system is not working nor it is viable. As the people's assemblies are doing in Kurdistan, it's necessary to look at schools as foundation of new relations among people. From local to global, we can provide a new system.
The 12th International Film War Women's Film Festival on Wheels has arrived in Adana for the first time. The slogan of the festival is a purse income budget of her own, and after visiting Istanbul and Mersin, it is now in Adana.
Saturday and Sunday, 18 full-length and short films, all by women directors, are to be shown at the Adana Cultural Arts Center, Historic Girls High School. The festival has been organized in solidarity with the Adana Women's Platform. We spoke to platform members Şadiye Yeşiltepe and Çiğdem Güvercin Dağdelen about preparations for the festival. After making contact with Fillmore on the suggestion of a friend, the preparations and promotion for the festival were completely in the relatively short time of 3 months. 5 women sponsors were found to provide a modest budget. Çiğdem Dağdelen said that one of the sponsors has succeeded in establishing a library during the period of the Gezi resistance. She added that they had also received support from trade unions. Şadiye Yeşiltepe added that local radio had also offered support by publicizing the festival. Yeşiltepe added that they had only been able to reach a limited segment of the population, adding that although they had used the internet to contact people, in future they wished to reach out to working women and housewives in the neighborhoods. Çiğdem Dağdelen commented that when they had been out, fly posting a woman working in a local restaurant had come over and asked for a poster.
This was it from us for tonight. We will see you next week on Thursday. Thanks for watching us. Goodbye.